Guilty on all counts. Life in prison without possibility of parole. The gavel cracked like a bone breaking. Marcus Thompson felt the sound in his ribs, in his spine, in the spaces between his heartbeats. 63 years old. 40 of them spent with grease under his fingernails, fixing transmissions and brake lines at his small garage in East Atlanta. Rebuilding engines that everyone else declared dead. Giving people second chances when their cars, and sometimes their lives, sputtered and died. Now those hands that had torqued bolts and changed oil and never once hurt another human being, were about to be chained for murder. The jury foreman wouldn't meet his eyes. 12 faces turned away like Marcus had become something toxic, something they needed distance from. The prosecutor, a sharp-suited woman named Victoria Brennan who'd built her career on high-profile convictions, smiled like a predator that had finally cornered wounded prey. Marcus's court-appointed lawyer, a tired woman named Patricia juggling 60 cases with a budget meant for 20, just stared at her legal pad. Defeated before the sentence even finished echoing through the courtroom. Subscribe before this story takes its darkest turn. Comment where you're watching from. Life sentence. For killing Richard Carter. A white supremacist with a rap sheet longer than Marcus's lease agreement. A man Marcus swore he'd never touched, never even met face to face. But the evidence painted a different story. Security footage from a budget motel off I-85 showing someone who looked exactly like Marcus entering Carter's room at 11:47 p.m. DNA evidence found on Carter's shirt collar, skin cells that matched Marcus's genetic profile. Fingerprints on the doorframe, clear as photographs. A witness, a motel clerk with a criminal record and shifty eyes, who'd pointed at Marcus during trial and said, "That's him. I'd recognize that face anywhere." The evidence was airtight. Or so the prosecution claimed. So the jury believed. Marcus had no alibi the original investigation cared about. He'd told them he was volunteering at Riverside Community Church that night, serving dinner to homeless families. But his overworked attorney never followed up. Never pulled phone records. Never interviewed the witnesses who could have placed him 12 miles from that motel when Carter's skull was being fractured. The system had decided within 48 hours, black mechanic with a secret connection to a murdered white supremacist equals guilty. Case closed. Justice served. The connection. That's what made this nightmare perfect for the prosecution. That's what Victoria Brennan had hammered home during closing arguments, her voice dripping with manufactured outrage as she painted Marcus as a vigilante seeking revenge against the monster who'd fathered the 2 children Marcus had secretly raised 25 years ago. December 1998. The memory crashed through Marcus's mind as guards stood to take him into custody, their keys jangling like wind chimes made of broken promises. 27 years dissolved in an instant. He was 38 again, locking up his garage on a night so cold his breath crystallized in the air, so quiet he could hear traffic lights changing 3 blocks away. He'd heard something behind the dumpster. Not rats, something smaller, more desperate. Whimpering that sounded almost human. 2 children. White. The girl maybe 5 years old, her brother 7. Bones visible through filthy clothes that should have been thrown away months ago. Bruises painting their pale skin in shades of purple, yellow, green, a timeline of abuse written on their bodies in the language of fists and neglect. The girl's eyes, too old for her face, already ancient with trauma, stared up at Marcus with zero expectation of help. Like she'd learned hope was a luxury that didn't apply to children like her. "Please don't leave us." Her voice barely existed. A ghost's whisper carried on winter wind. Marcus should have called child services. Should have walked away. He was broke, living in a cramped apartment above his garage, eating ramen 3 meals a day just to keep the business from drowning in red ink. He had no wife, no family, no business taking in 2 traumatized white kids in a city that would ask questions he couldn't answer. Questions that might destroy him. But he'd scooped them up anyway. Felt how light they were, dangerously light, like birds with hollow bones, and carried them upstairs. fed them canned soup heated on a hot plate, watching them burn their tongues because they couldn't slow down, couldn't trust the food would still be there in 5 minutes. Wrapped them in blankets that smelled like motor oil and cheap detergent. Let them sleep in his only bed while he spent the night on a kitchen chair, watching them breathe, terrified they'd stop. Emma and Ryan. Those were the names they whispered the next morning, voices hoarse from screaming no one had answered. No last names. No parents they'd name. No home address. Just 2 children the system had somehow let slip through every crack, fall through every safety net, disappear while everyone looked the other way. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Marcus kept waiting for someone to come looking. No one ever did. No missing persons reports. No frantic parents. No police knocking on his door asking questions. Emma and Ryan were invisible, children's society had forgotten before they'd even disappeared. So Marcus raised them. Secretly. Illegally. Taught Ryan to read using car repair manuals because textbooks cost money Marcus didn't have. Celebrated Emma's first real birthday with a grocery store cake and $6 store candles that dripped wax onto cheap frosting. Attended parent-teacher conferences pretending to be their uncle, praying no one would ask for documentation. Built a family from nothing but necessity and a choice he'd made behind a dumpster on the coldest night of 1998. He'd discovered their father's identity 3 years in. Found old photographs tucked in Emma's tattered backpack, pictures of a man with swastika tattoos covering his arms, iron crosses on his knuckles, cold eyes staring into the camera like he was deciding who to hurt next. Richard Carter. The name meant nothing to Marcus then. Just another monster in a world full of them. He'd hidden the photos, never told the children, and prayed that monster would never come back. Carter had come back. 8 months ago. Texts from unknown numbers threatening Marcus, demanding his property, meaning Emma and Ryan, now 30 and 32, successful criminal defense attorneys in Chicago with lives Carter had never been part of, never earned the right to claim. Carter wanted $50,000 to stay silent about the kidnapping. When Marcus refused to pay, when Emma told her biological father to disappear forever, Carter had threatened to destroy everything Marcus had built. 2 weeks later, Carter was dead. Skull fractured. Motel room trashed. Marcus's DNA and fingerprints everywhere the prosecution needed them to be. Victoria Brennan had called it premeditated murder. Revenge killing. Eliminating the threat. The jury had believed every word, deliberated for 90 minutes, came back with guilty verdicts that would bury Marcus alive. Now Marcus stood in that courtroom, chains approaching, freedom measured in seconds. The judge, an older man named Whitmore with gray hair and tired eyes, opened his mouth to formalize the sentence that would end Marcus's life. Drop a comment, where are you watching this unfold from right now? Then the courtroom doors exploded open with a sound like thunder breaking. 2 people in expensive suits sprinted down the center aisle, attorney badges held high, briefcases swinging, voices cutting through the chaos like lightning through storm clouds. Your Honor, stop. Marcus Thompson is innocent, we have proof. Marcus's heart stopped. Breath caught in his throat. He knew those voices. Would know them anywhere, in any crowd, across any distance. Emma and Ryan. The children he'd saved from a dumpster 25 years ago. And they were about to return the favor. Judge Whitmore's gavel slammed down. Order. Who are you people and how dare you interrupt these proceedings? Emma Mitchell strode forward, her heels clicking against marble floors like gunshots. Ryan followed half a step behind, both of them breathless from running, both holding leather portfolios stamped with the logo of Brennan and Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious criminal defense firms. The same last name as the prosecutor who'd just buried Marcus. Emma Mitchell and Ryan Mitchell, Your Honor. Criminal defense attorneys licensed in Illinois and Georgia. We represent Marcus Thompson, and we have evidence that proves his innocence beyond any doubt. Victoria Brennan shot to her feet, her chair scraping backward with a screech that made several jurors flinch. "Your Honor, this is outrageous." The trial concluded. The verdict was rendered. These attorneys can file an appeal through proper channels like everyone else. "Sit down, Victoria." Emma's voice carried venom that could melt steel. "You knew. You knew the evidence was contaminated and you prosecuted anyway. Subscribe now, you won't believe what she's about to expose." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Spectators shouted questions. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Judge Whitmore's gavel cracked 3 times before silence returned. "Ms. Mitchell, you will address this court with respect or I'll hold you in contempt. Now explain yourself. Quickly." Ryan opened his portfolio, pulled out a document stamped with official seals and county clerk signatures. "Your Honor, we have sworn affidavits from 37 witnesses placing Marcus Thompson at Riverside Community Church serving dinner to homeless families the exact night Richard Carter was murdered. We have time-stamped photographs showing Marcus plating food at 11:43 p.m., 4 minutes before the prosecution claims he entered Carter's motel room 12 miles away. We have security footage from the church. Phone records showing calls made from Marcus's cell phone pinging towers near the church. Credit card receipts for supplies purchased that afternoon. An alibi so airtight it's criminal that the original defense failed to investigate. Patricia, Marcus's court-appointed lawyer, looked like she'd been slapped across the face with reality. I asked Mr. Thompson about his whereabouts. He mentioned a church event but couldn't provide documentation. I had 17 other cases that week and limited resources for investigation. I did my best with. And an innocent man almost died in prison because your best wasn't good enough." Emma's words landed like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that would destroy everything they touched. Judge Whitmore studied the documents Ryan placed before him, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. His expression shifted from irritation to concern to something darker. "These appear legitimate. But Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Mitchell, you share the prosecutor's last name. What's your relationship to Ms. Brennan?" "She's our aunt," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the bomb he was about to drop. "Our father's sister. And she knows exactly who we are, Your Honor. She knows Marcus Thompson raised us after our biological father, Richard Carter, abandoned us behind a dumpster when I was 7 and Emma was 5. She knows we became attorneys specifically to practice criminal defense, specifically to protect people like Marcus from a system that fails them. And she prosecuted this case anyway, knowing the man who saved our lives was innocent." Victoria Brennan's face drained of color like someone had pulled a plug. That's not, Your Honor, You received our emails 6 weeks before trial." Emma pulled out printed messages, dates and timestamps highlighted in yellow like evidence at a crime scene. "We sent you every piece of alibi evidence. Every witness statement. Every photograph. Every phone record. Every shred of proof that Marcus Thompson was innocent. You ignored all of it and pushed for conviction anyway because winning this case would boost your political career. You're running for district attorney next year, aren't you, Aunt Victoria?" The reporters in the back row started typing furiously. This was bigger than a wrongful conviction now. This was corruption, ambition, and betrayal wrapped in expensive suits and legal jargon. The judge's voice went cold enough to freeze water. "Ms. Brennan, is this true?" "Your Honor, Victoria's hands trembled, papers fluttering like wounded birds. The evidence against Mr. Thompson was substantial. DNA. Fingerprints. Security footage. A witness identification. My personal connection to the defense attorneys doesn't change the facts of the case. I prosecuted based on evidence, not emotion. Except every fact is wrong." Ryan's voice cut sharp as broken glass. The DNA was contaminated, samples collected improperly with broken chain of custody. The fingerprints were planted, we have evidence Marcus's garage was broken into 1 month before the murder. The security footage was manipulated, compressed and re-uploaded to degrade image quality. And the witness was paid $1,500 3 days after his testimony. We have proof of all of it, and we have the real killer in custody right now, in a federal holding facility, ready to confess everything. Marcus finally found his voice, raw with emotion he couldn't name. Emma. Ryan. I didn't know you were lawyers. I haven't heard from you in 7 years. I thought you'd forgotten about me. Emma turned to him, eyes glistening with tears she refused to let fall. We know, Pops. We're sorry. We needed time to build our careers, to become good enough to protect you if you ever needed it. We always knew Richard Carter might come back. We always knew someone might try to use our past against you. We always knew this day might come, and we spent every single day preparing for it. You've been preparing for this? For 7 years. 25 years, Ryan corrected softly. Since the first night you fed us soup that tasted like heaven because we'd been starving. Since you let us sleep in your bed while you spent the night in a chair. Since you taught me to read using car manuals because you couldn't afford books. Since you showed up to Emma's school play pretending to be our uncle because you couldn't legally be our father. Since you showed us what a real parent looks like. We spent our entire lives preparing to save yours if we had to. Judge Whitmore cleared his throat, the sound cutting through emotion thick enough to choke on. This is highly irregular. But given the severity of these allegations and the documentation presented, I'm prepared to hear your evidence. Ms. Brennan, you will sit down and remain silent unless I address you directly. Mr. Thompson, please remain in the courtroom. Guards, remove his restraints immediately. The chains fell from Marcus's wrists with a clatter that sounded like freedom might sound. He rubbed his skin where metal had bitten into flesh, leaving red marks that would fade slower than the trauma of wearing them. He stared at Emma and Ryan like they were mirages that might dissolve if he blinked. Emma opened her briefcase, pulled out a thick stack of documents organized with colored tabs and indexed pages. Professional. Thorough. Devastating. Your Honor, let's start with the night Marcus found us. December 15, 1998. Temperatures dropped to 23 degrees. We were sleeping behind a dumpster off Memorial Drive, wearing summer clothes in winter because that's all we had. Covered in bruises from our father's fists, bruises we'd learned to hide, learned to explain away as accidents. We hadn't eaten in 3 days. Our mother had overdosed and died 2 weeks earlier in a motel room while we watched, too young to understand death, old enough to know she wasn't coming back. Richard Carter, our biological father, had dumped us behind a dumpster like garbage because feeding kids was too expensive and we were, in his words, too weak to be useful to the cause. Ryan continued, his voice steady but his hands clenched into fists. Marcus Thompson found us purely by accident. He had no reason to stop. No obligation to help. He was barely surviving himself, 3 months behind on rent, eating 1 meal a day, struggling to keep his business from collapsing. But he stopped anyway. He took us home. He fed us. He gave us his bed while he slept in a kitchen chair for 2 months until he could afford a couch from Goodwill. And that first night, Emma's voice softened into something vulnerable. We heard him crying in the kitchen at 3 in the morning. Crying because he didn't know how he'd feed us tomorrow. Crying because he was terrified child services would take us away and separate us. Crying because he'd seen our bruises and knew exactly what they meant and it broke something inside him. Marcus closed his eyes. He'd forgotten that. Forgotten the weight of impossible responsibility crushing down on him that first night, alone in his kitchen praying to a God he wasn't sure was listening. We pretended to sleep, Ryan said. But we heard everything. We heard him decide to keep us anyway, even though it might destroy him. And that's the man Victoria Brennan just convinced 12 people was a cold-blooded murderer. Hit subscribe if you want to see justice happen. Judge Whitmore leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Continue, Ms. Mitchell. You mentioned evidence proving Mr. Thompson's innocence. Present it. Emma smiled, sharp, dangerous, and filled with 25 years of gratitude turned into weapons. Your Honor, let me show you exactly how an innocent man was framed for murder. Emma pulled a slim tablet from her briefcase, connected it to the courtroom's projection system with practiced efficiency. The screen behind Judge Whitmore flickered to life, displaying a phone number with an Atlanta area code. This is Richard Carter's cell phone number, Emma announced. Recovered from his personal effects after his death. The prosecution never bothered to examine the call logs or text messages. We did. She tapped the screen. Text messages appeared, enlarged so everyone in the courtroom could read them. The first one was dated 8 months before Carter's murder. Unknown number, I know where you are. Unknown number, I know you have my property. Unknown number, those kids belong to me. I'm coming for what's mine. Marcus's breath caught. He remembered those messages. He deleted every one, convinced ignoring them would make the threat disappear. Ryan advanced to the next screen. More messages, each one escalating in violence and specificity. Unknown number, the black man who stole white children. That's a story the news would love. Unknown number, how long you think you'd last in prison, Thompson? Child kidnapping carries serious time. Unknown number. Pay me $50,000 or I expose everything. These messages, Ryan continued, were sent to Marcus Thompson over a 6-week period. Marcus never responded. Never engaged. He hoped silence would protect him. Subscribe, the evidence gets even darker from here. Victoria Brennan stood abruptly. Your Honor, this proves motive. These messages show Marcus Thompson had every reason to want Richard Carter dead. Sit down, Aunt Victoria. Emma's voice could cut diamonds. I'm not finished. Judge Whitmore raised his hand. Ms. Brennan, you'll get your turn. Let them present their evidence. Emma advanced the screen again. Now it showed a voicemail transcript, time-stamped 7 months ago, 3 weeks before Carter's death. This is the actual voicemail Richard Carter left on Marcus's phone. We've had it analyzed by forensic audio specialists. It's definitely Carter's voice. She pressed play. The courtroom filled with a gravelly voice dripping with hatred. Thompson. You think you can ignore me? I brought those kids into this world. They're mine by blood. You're just some, the slur that followed made several people gasp. Who thought playing hero would make you special? I'm out now. Did 23 years because nobody from the Brotherhood would testify. But I'm free now, and I'm coming for my property. You got 2 choices, pay me $50,000 and I disappear forever, or I go to the police and the media and every white supremacist group that still listens to me. Imagine what they'd do knowing a black man stole white children. You'd be dead in a week. Call me. The silence in the courtroom felt suffocating. Marcus stared at his hands, remembering the terror that voicemail had sparked. The sleepless nights wondering if Carter would make good on his threats. Marcus never called back, Ryan said. Because Marcus Thompson doesn't negotiate with terrorists. But someone else did respond to Richard Carter's threats. Someone who had much more to lose than Marcus did. Emma pulled up phone records, columns of numbers, times, dates. These are Richard Carter's phone records for the 3 months before his death. Notice anything unusual? She highlighted a number that appeared 43 times. This number called Carter repeatedly. The conversations grew longer each time. The last call was made 2 days before Carter's murder and lasted 18 minutes. Ryan advanced to the next slide, a photograph of a man in his late 40s with a shaved head and tattoos crawling up his neck. Cold eyes stared into the camera with the dead expression of someone who'd stopped seeing other humans as anything but obstacles. Vincent Coslow. Carter's former cellmate. Member of the same white supremacist brotherhood Carter belonged to. Released from federal custody 6 weeks before Carter was murdered. And the owner of the phone number that called Carter 43 times. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Judge Whitmore leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. But here's where it gets interesting, Your Honor. Vincent Coslow wasn't acting alone. 2 days after Carter's murder, Coslow received a wire transfer of $15,000 from an offshore account registered in the Cayman Islands. We traced that account. She pulled up banking records, account numbers partially redacted but enough visible to verify authenticity. The account belongs to a shell corporation called Southern Heritage Consulting. And guess who sits on the board of directors? The next slide showed incorporation documents. Among the list of names, one jumped out in bold red highlighting. Frank Harrigan, Detective, Atlanta Police Department, Homicide Division. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled. Judge Whitmore's gavel cracked 5 times before order returned. Detective Harrigan, Ryan said, his voice cutting through the chaos, was the lead investigator on Marcus Thompson's case. He collected the DNA evidence. He secured the fingerprints. He interviewed the motel clerk who identified Marcus. He built the entire case that put an innocent man behind bars. Emma advanced through more slides. Photographs from the early 2000s showing Harrigan and Carter in camouflage gear, standing with assault rifles at some rural compound. Other men surrounded them, all sporting similar tattoos and dead eyes. Detective Harrigan and Richard Carter served together in a militia group called the Southern Heritage Brotherhood from 2001 to 2004. They trained together. Committed crimes together. And when Carter got arrested in 2004, Harrigan avoided prosecution by cooperating with federal investigators. He gave up just enough information to stay out of prison himself while everyone else went down. Ryan's hands clenched into fists. Carter never forgave that betrayal. When he got out 8 months ago, he didn't just want money from Marcus. He wanted revenge on Harrigan. He threatened to expose Harrigan's continued involvement with white supremacist groups, involvement that would destroy Harrigan's career, his reputation, his freedom. He had documentation. Photographs. Audio recordings of meetings that happened as recently as last year. Emma pulled up text messages between Harrigan and Coslow. These messages were recovered from Coslow's phone when federal agents arrested him 3 days ago. Read them carefully. Harrigan, the old man's talking too much. Becoming a liability. Coslow, want me to handle it? Harrigan, make it clean. I'll make sure someone else takes the fall. Coslow, who? Harrigan, the black guy Carter's been harassing. Perfect scapegoat. Already has motive. I'll plant evidence. Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Everything, his arrest, his conviction, the evidence that seemed so damning, all of it engineered by a detective who needed him destroyed to cover his own crimes. 1 month before Carter's murder, Emma said, pulling up security footage on the screen, Marcus's garage was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but Marcus noticed his toolbox had been disturbed. Items moved. Personal effects missing. A coffee mug, work gloves, a wrench he used daily. The footage showed a figure in dark clothes using bolt cutters on the garage's back fence, slipping inside, emerging 20 minutes later carrying a small bag. Ryan enhanced the image, zooming in on the intruder's face caught by a street light for just 2 seconds. That's Detective Frank Harrigan breaking into Marcus Thompson's garage to collect items he could use to plant DNA and fingerprints at the murder scene he was already planning. Don't miss what happens next. Hit subscribe now. Victoria Brennan looked like she might vomit. Her carefully constructed case was collapsing in real time, revealing corruption so deep it threatened to take down her entire office. Judge Whitmore removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes like he could erase what he'd just learned. Ms. Mitchell, you said Vincent Coslow is in custody? Yes, Your Honor. Federal custody. And he's ready to testify to everything. He's already provided a full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. He murdered Richard Carter on Detective Harrigan's orders. Harrigan provided him with Marcus Thompson's DNA and fingerprints to plant at the scene. Harrigan paid the motel clerk to identify Marcus from a photo lineup. Harrigan manipulated the security footage and falsified evidence reports. Emma's smile was razor-sharp. "Your Honor, Marcus Thompson isn't just innocent. He's the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by a detective who was willing to destroy an innocent man's life to protect his own secrets." Judge Whitmore's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Where is Detective Harrigan now?" Ryan glanced toward the courtroom doors. "Federal agents should be arresting him right about." The doors burst open. 3 FBI agents in tactical gear entered, moving with purpose toward a man sitting in the back row. A man in a rumpled suit who'd been watching the proceedings with growing horror. Detective Frank Harrigan tried to run. He didn't make it 3 steps before they had him in handcuffs. The courtroom descended into controlled chaos as FBI agents dragged Detective Harrigan out, his shouts of innocence fading into the hallway. Judge Whitmore's gavel worked overtime, cracking against wood until silence grudgingly returned. Reporters typed furiously. Spectators whispered behind cupped hands. Marcus sat frozen, watching his nightmare unravel thread by thread. "Your Honor," Emma said once order was restored, "the conspiracy to frame Marcus Thompson goes deeper than Detective Harrigan's evidence planting. The original investigation ignored exculpatory evidence that would have cleared Marcus within 48 hours. Evidence that was readily available but deliberately overlooked." Victoria Brennan remained seated, her earlier confidence shattered like glass on concrete. She didn't object. Didn't speak. Just stared at the table in front of her while her career imploded. Ryan approached the projection screen, pulling up new documents. On the night of Richard Carter's murder, November 7th of last year, Marcus Thompson was volunteering at Riverside Community Church's weekly dinner service for homeless families. This wasn't a secret. Marcus volunteered there every Tuesday night for 6 years. The church keeps meticulous records. He displayed a sign-in sheet with Marcus's signature, time-stamped 5:47 p.m. Marcus arrived at the church at 5:47 p.m. The dinner service runs from 6 to midnight. Marcus stayed the entire shift, as he always did. Emma took over. The prosecution claimed Marcus entered Richard Carter's motel room at 11:47 p.m. The budget in off I-85 is exactly 12.3 miles from Riverside Community Church. Even with zero traffic, that's a 17-minute drive. There is no possible way Marcus could have been in both places. She pulled up photographs, dozens of them. Marcus in a serving apron, plating food behind steam tables. Marcus talking to an elderly woman with a walker. Marcus wiping down tables while other volunteers cleaned up. Each photo had a timestamp burned into the corner. These photographs were taken by the church's volunteer coordinator, Angela Preston, throughout the evening. She posts them on the church's social media page every week to show community members how they can help. These photos were publicly available on Facebook the day after Carter's murder. A simple internet search would have found them. Ryan's jaw tightened. Patricia Chen, Marcus's court-appointed attorney, never searched. Detective Harrigan certainly never looked. And the prosecution, he glanced at Victoria. Received copies of these photographs from us 6 weeks before trial and chose not to disclose them to the defense. Judge Whitmore's expression darkened. "Ms. Brennan, did you receive exculpatory evidence and fail to disclose it?" Victoria finally looked up, her voice hollow. The photographs weren't conclusive. They could have been taken on a different night. Metadata can be manipulated. I made a judgment call about their reliability." "A judgment call?" Emma's voice dripped acid. "Let me show you what else you deemed unreliable." She pulled up video footage, grainy but clear enough. The timestamp read November 7th, 11:43 p.m. The location banner said Riverside Community Church, front entrance. The footage showed Marcus carrying trash bags to a dumpster outside the church's kitchen entrance. He was wearing the same clothes from the earlier photos, gray sweatshirt, jeans, white sneakers. He dumped the trash, checked his phone, walked back inside. The timestamp advanced, 11:46 p.m. Marcus emerged again, this time helping an elderly man load leftover food containers into a beat-up Honda. 11:51 p.m. This security footage, Ryan said, was recorded by the church's surveillance system. The system runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The footage is backed up to a cloud server with encrypted timestamps that cannot be altered. We subpoenaed the footage ourselves because nobody else bothered to look for it. Emma advanced to a split screen, church footage on the left, motel footage on the right. Both showing 11:47 p.m. On the left, Marcus stood outside the church talking to the volunteer coordinator. On the right, a figure entered Richard Carter's motel room. Same time. Different places. Physically impossible for Marcus to be in both locations. Yet somehow, the prosecution convinced a jury this man could teleport. Subscribe if you believe evidence should matter more than convenience. Ryan pulled up phone records next, dense columns of numbers and cell tower locations. Marcus's cell phone pinged towers near Riverside Community Church all evening. The last ping at 12:07 a.m., when Marcus finally left the church after helping close up. His phone never pinged towers near the Budget Inn. Not once. Emma highlighted specific entries. Meanwhile, Detective Harrigan's personal cell phone pinged towers near Marcus's garage at 2:14 a.m., 3 hours after the murder, when he claimed in his official report that he was at the police station filing paperwork. He was actually planting evidence at Marcus's shop under cover of darkness. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. "You have proof of this?" Security footage from a gas station across the street from Marcus's garage. Ryan played the video, grainy nighttime footage showing Harrigan's unmarked police car pulling up to Marcus's shop, Harrigan using a key to unlock the back door, disappearing inside for 11 minutes, leaving with empty hands. He'd already collected Marcus's DNA and fingerprints from the earlier break-in. This visit was to plant additional evidence, fibers from Carter's clothing in Marcus's truck, a burner phone with texts threatening Carter hidden in Marcus's desk drawer. Evidence that would be discovered during the official search 3 days later. Emma pulled up the search warrant and subsequent evidence logs. And look who led the search team. Detective Frank Harrigan. Who conveniently found the burner phone in the first 10 minutes of searching. A phone Marcus had never seen before that day. Ryan displayed forensic reports. We had independent experts examine the DNA evidence the prosecution presented. The samples were contaminated, multiple DNA profiles mixed together, suggesting the evidence was collected improperly or deliberately tainted. The chain of custody documentation shows irregularities. Signatures that don't match official records. Time gaps where evidence sat unaccounted for. The fingerprints tell the same story, Emma continued. Forensic analysis shows the fingerprints on Carter's motel room doorframe were transferred, meaning they came from an object Marcus touched, then were lifted and placed at the crime scene. The prints show compression marks consistent with being moved. Any competent forensic examiner would have caught this. Detective Harrigan made sure no independent examiner ever looked at the evidence. Judge Whitmore removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly. What about the witness? The motel clerk who identified Mr. Thompson? Ryan smiled grimly. Gerald Foster. 47 years old. 3 prior convictions for fraud. Currently on probation. Works night shift at the Budget Inn for $9 an hour. 3 days after testifying against Marcus, Gerald deposited $1,500 cash into his checking account. He told his bank it was a gift from his sister. His sister has been dead for 2 years. Emma pulled up bank records showing the deposit. The money came from Detective Harrigan. Paid through an intermediary, but we traced it. Gerald Foster was paid to identify Marcus from a photo lineup. He was coached on what to say, when to say it, how to appear credible. "We interviewed Gerald yesterday," Ryan said. "Showed him evidence of the payment trail. Explained he was facing perjury charges and obstruction of justice. He gave us a full sworn statement recanting his testimony. Stay with us, justice is coming." The affidavit appeared on screen. Gerald Foster's signature at the bottom, notarized and dated 3 days ago. "I, Gerald Foster, swear that I lied under oath during the trial of Marcus Thompson. I never saw Marcus Thompson at the Budget Inn on November 7th. Detective Frank Harrigan showed me photographs of Marcus, told me to memorize his face, and paid me $1,500 to identify him in court. I am deeply sorry for my actions and wish to make this right." Victoria Brennan stood on shaking legs. "Your Honor, I didn't know. I prosecuted based on the evidence Detective Harrigan provided. I had no knowledge of any conspiracy or evidence planting." "You had knowledge of the alibi evidence," Emma shot back. "You received it from us 6 weeks before trial. You made a conscious choice to suppress it. That makes you complicit, Aunt Victoria. You can claim ignorance about Harrigan's corruption, but you can't claim ignorance about hiding evidence that would have freed an innocent man." Judge Whitmore's voice came out cold and final. "Ms. Brennan, you are removed from this case effective immediately. I will be referring this matter to the State Bar for investigation into prosecutorial misconduct. This court stands in recess for 30 minutes while I review all evidence presented today." The gavel fell. Marcus sat in stunned silence, watching 25 years of fear and 5 months of imprisonment crack apart under the weight of truth he'd never expected to see revealed. Emma and Ryan approached him, and for the first time since they'd burst through those courtroom doors, Marcus saw them clearly. Not as the frightened children he'd rescued from a dumpster, but as the warriors they'd become. Warriors who'd spent their entire lives preparing to save his. The 30-minute recess stretched into an hour. Marcus sat in a small conference room adjacent to the courtroom with Emma and Ryan flanking him like sentinels. No one spoke at first. The silence carried too much weight: 25 years of separation, 7 years of absence, 5 months of imprisonment, all converging into this moment where words felt inadequate. Finally, Marcus broke. "Why didn't you contact me? 7 years, and I thought you'd just moved on. Forgot about the man who raised you." Emma's eyes welled. "We could never forget you, Pops. We stayed away because we were building something. Building ourselves into people who could protect you when the time came. We knew Richard Carter would resurface eventually. Men like him always do." Ryan pulled out his phone, scrolled through photos. "We've been watching over you the whole time. See?" He showed Marcus pictures taken from a distance. Marcus outside his garage, talking to customers. Marcus at the grocery store. Marcus at Riverside Community Church serving dinner. Dozens of photos spanning 7 years. "We hired a private investigator to check on you monthly," Ryan explained. "Made sure you were safe. Made sure Carter hadn't found you yet. When Carter got released 8 months ago, our investigator flagged it immediately. We knew contact was inevitable." Emma continued. "We started building the defense case before Carter even reached out to you. Documented everything. When he sent those first threatening texts, we knew we had maybe 6 months before something happened. We didn't know it would be murder. We thought maybe extortion, harassment, assault. But we prepared for the worst." "You prepared for me to be framed for murder?" Marcus's voice cracked. "We prepared for anything that would put you in legal jeopardy," Ryan said. "Because we know how the system works, Pops. We've spent our entire careers watching it fail people who look like you. Black men accused of crimes they didn't commit. Evidence fabricated. Alibis ignored. We couldn't let that happen to you." A knock interrupted them. A bailiff opened the door. "Judge Whitmore is ready." The courtroom felt different now. Heavier. The reporters had multiplied, word had spread about the conspiracy, and national media outlets had dispatched crews. Camera flashes erupted as Marcus entered, Emma and Ryan creating a barrier between him and the chaos. Judge Whitmore took his seat, his expression unreadable. "I've reviewed the evidence presented by the defense. I've consulted with the district attorney's office. And I've spoken with federal prosecutors handling the case against Detective Harrigan and Vincent Coslow. Before I make my ruling, I have questions." He turned to Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, you raised Emma and Ryan Mitchell from ages 5 and 7 until they turned 18. You did this without legal authority. Without adoption papers. Without informing Child Protective Services. Do you understand that your actions, while well-intentioned, violated numerous laws?" Marcus stood slowly. "Yes, Your Honor. I understand. I broke the law by keeping those children. But if I'd called CPS that night, they would have been separated. Put into different foster homes. Maybe abused again. Maybe lost in a system that was already overwhelmed and failing. I couldn't let that happen. So you made yourself judge and jury over their fate?" "No, sir. I made myself their father. Because they needed one, and nobody else was stepping up. Subscribe, this moment changes everything." Judge Whitmore studied Marcus for a long moment. "Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Mitchell. You've presented compelling evidence of Mr. Thompson's innocence. But your aunt raised a valid point earlier. Your relationship with the defendant creates a conflict of interest. How do I know your evidence isn't tainted by personal bias?" Emma stepped forward. "Your Honor, every piece of evidence we've presented has been independently verified. The church security footage was subpoenaed directly from the church's cloud storage provider with encrypted timestamps. The phone records came from cell service providers. The bank records from financial institutions. Gerald Foster's recantation was witnessed by a notary public and federal investigators. Vincent Coslow's confession was given to federal prosecutors, not to us. None of our evidence relies solely on our word." Ryan added, "We've handed over all original documentation to federal authorities and the state bar investigation. Everything we've shown this court will be subjected to independent forensic analysis. If you doubt our evidence, verify it yourself." Judge Whitmore nodded slowly. "I've already begun that process. But there's another question that troubles me. Mr. Thompson, you raised white children as a black man in a society that would have questioned your motives. You kept them hidden. You lied about your relationship to them. How do I know you didn't have ulterior motives?" The question landed like a slap. Marcus felt rage building, rage at being asked to justify saving children's lives, at having his motives questioned because of his skin color, at a system that would rather see those kids dead than raised by someone who looked like him. But Emma spoke before he could. Her voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "Your Honor, you want to know Marcus Thompson's motives? I'll tell you. On my 8th birthday, 3 years after he found us, Marcus gave me a card. Inside, he'd written something I've kept in my wallet every day since." She pulled out a worn, folded piece of paper. Her voice shook as she read. "Emma, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if I'm a good enough parent. But I promise you this, I will love you and protect you until my last breath, not because you're mine, but because you deserve to be loved. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Love, Pops." The courtroom was silent. Emma wiped her eyes. "His motive, Your Honor, was love. Pure and simple. He didn't save us because he wanted something from us. He saved us because we were children who needed saving, and he was a man who couldn't walk away from suffering. That's it. That's the whole story." Ryan pulled out his own wallet, extracted a similar worn card. "He wrote me one too. On my 10th birthday. I've read it 1,000 times when life got hard. When law school felt impossible. When cases felt unwinnable. I'd read his words and remember that if a man with nothing could save 2 children, I could face whatever challenge was in front of me. Judge Whitmore's expression softened almost imperceptibly. The question before this court isn't whether Mr. Thompson is a good man. The evidence suggests he is. The question is whether justice was served in his conviction. Based on the evidence presented today, the answer is clear: it was not. He straightened in his chair, and Marcus felt time slow to a crawl. The conviction of Marcus Thompson is hereby overturned. All charges are dismissed with prejudice, meaning they cannot be refiled. Mr. Thompson, you are free to go. The gavel fell. For a moment, no one moved. Then Emma and Ryan crashed into Marcus, arms wrapping around him, tears flowing freely. The courtroom erupted in applause. Reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes created lightning storms. But Marcus heard none of it. He held his children, his real children, the ones he'd chosen and who'd chosen him back, and felt chains heavier than steel finally break apart. Freedom tasted like tears and triumph in 25 years of love that had survived everything the world threw at it. Don't miss the final chapter. Hit subscribe. Marcus walked out of the courthouse into blinding sunlight and a wall of reporters 20 people deep. Microphones thrust toward his face like weapons. Questions overlapped into incomprehensible noise. Emma and Ryan created a human shield, pushing through the crowd toward a black SUV idling at the curb. Mr. Thompson, how does it feel to be free? Are you planning to sue the city? Did you know Detective Harrigan was corrupt? What do you want to say to Victoria Brennan? Marcus said nothing. His legs felt unsteady after 5 months of prison shoes on concrete floors. The sunlight hurt his eyes. Freedom felt disorienting, too bright, too loud, too overwhelming after months of gray walls and rigid schedules. They reached the SUV. Ryan opened the door, helped Marcus inside. Emma slid in beside him while Ryan took the front passenger seat. The driver, a woman in her 30s wearing a professional suit, pulled away from the curb as reporters swarmed the vehicle like wasps. Marcus, Emma said gently, this is Keisha Robertson. She's a civil rights attorney who specializes in wrongful conviction cases. We've asked her to represent you in the civil litigation against the city and Detective Harrigan. Marcus shook his head. I don't want to sue anyone. I just want to go home. I just want my life back. Keisha glanced at him through the rearview mirror. Mr. Thompson, the city of Atlanta owes you 5 months of your life. Detective Harrigan nearly stole the rest of it. You deserve compensation for what was done to you. I don't want money. Marcus's voice came out harder than intended. I want to fix cars. I want to volunteer at my church. I want peace. Money won't give me that. But justice might, Ryan said quietly. Pops, if you don't sue, nothing changes. Harrigan goes to prison, but the systems that enabled him stay intact. The prosecutors who ignore evidence. The defense attorneys too overworked to investigate. The judges who don't ask questions. If you sue, you force change. You make them examine how this happened and how to prevent it from happening again. Marcus looked out the window at Atlanta passing by, streets he'd driven 1,000 times, neighborhoods he'd known for 40 years. Everything looked the same but felt different. Like he was seeing his city through glass, separated from it by an invisible barrier his imprisonment had created. How's my shop? He asked, changing the subject. Emma and Ryan exchanged glances. The kind of look that said they'd discussed this already and dreaded having this conversation. The landlord terminated your lease, Emma said carefully. After you were convicted, he evicted you for criminal activity on the premises. He rented the space to a vape shop 2 months ago. Marcus felt the news like a physical blow. His garage. His business. The place he'd built from nothing over 37 years. Gone. What about my apartment? My things? Also evicted. The landlord boxed up your belongings and put them in storage. We've been paying the storage fees. Everything you owned is safe, but, Ryan hesitated. But you don't have a home to go back to right now. The SUV pulled up to a hotel near downtown. The Westin Peachtree Plaza, a place Marcus had driven past thousands of times but never imagined staying in. Too expensive. Too fancy. Not for mechanics who smelled like motor oil and earned money with their hands. We've booked you a suite, Emma said. Top floor. Room service. Whatever you need. Just for a few days until we figure out permanent housing. Marcus wanted to refuse. Wanted to insist he could find his own place, rebuild on his own terms. But the truth was he had nothing. No home. No business. No income. 5 months of imprisonment had erased the life he'd spent 4 decades building. Subscribe to see how Marcus rebuilds from nothing. They rode the elevator in silence. The suite was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Atlanta's skyline, a bedroom bigger than his old apartment's entire living room, furniture that probably cost more than his truck. Ryan set Marcus's few belongings, recovered from the evidence locker, on the coffee table. A wallet with expired credit cards. A phone that hadn't been charged in 5 months. Keys to locks that no longer belonged to him. We'll leave you alone for a bit, Emma said. But we're staying in the hotel. Room 2847. Call us anytime, day or night. We're not leaving you again, Pops. Never again. After they left, Marcus stood at the window watching the city glow in afternoon light. He'd been free for 3 hours and already felt lost. Prison had been horrible, but at least it had structure. Rules. A routine that didn't require decisions about where to sleep or what to do next. Now he had freedom and no idea what to do with it. His phone, plugged into a charger Emma had left, vibrated to life. Messages flooded in, dozens of them, accumulated over 5 months. Most were spam. But some were from church members, neighbors, former customers. Messages of support that had gone unanswered because he'd been locked in a cage for a murder he didn't commit. One message stopped him cold. From a number he didn't recognize, sent 4 months ago. Unknown, you took my kids. You stole my blood. You deserve everything happening to you. Die in prison, Thompson. Richard Carter's last message. Sent from beyond the grave, or more likely from Harrigan using Carter's phone to build the narrative of Marcus as a revenge killer. Marcus deleted it. Then deleted every other message Carter had sent. Cleared the evidence of those threats from his phone like he could clear them from his memory. A knock at the door. Marcus opened it to find a hotel employee pushing a room service cart loaded with food, burgers, fries, salad, soup, sides Marcus hadn't ordered. Compliments of MS. Mitchell and Mr. Mitchell, the employee explained. They said to tell you that you need to eat, and they remember you always made sure they ate first. The employee left. Marcus stared at the food and felt something inside him crack. 25 years ago, he'd fed 2 starving children with soup he could barely afford. Today, those children, now successful attorneys with resources he couldn't fathom, were making sure he ate first. The cycle had come full around. Marcus sat down and ate. Not because he was hungry, but because Emma and Ryan had asked him to. Because they'd spent their whole lives learning to take care of him the way he'd taken care of them. His phone rang. Ryan's number. Pops, turn on the news. Channel 5. Marcus found the remote, turned on the massive television. The local news showed footage of Detective Frank Harrigan being led into federal court in handcuffs. The ticker across the bottom read, Detective charged in conspiracy to frame innocent man. The anchor's voice filled the room. In a shocking development, Atlanta Police Detective Frank Harrigan faces federal charges including conspiracy to commit murder, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and deprivation of civil rights under color of law. If convicted on all counts, Harrigan faces life in prison, the same sentence Marcus Thompson nearly served for a crime he didn't commit. The screen shifted to footage of Victoria Brennan leaving the courthouse surrounded by reporters. She looked diminished, haunted. The anchor continued, Prosecutor Victoria Brennan has been placed on administrative leave pending a state bar investigation into allegations of prosecutorial misconduct. Sources tell us she may face disbarment for allegedly suppressing exculpatory evidence. Marcus turned off the television. Hit subscribe, 1 chapter left. He didn't feel satisfaction watching his persecutors fall. He felt empty. Like justice was supposed to fill the void imprisonment had created, but instead it just revealed how much he'd lost. His phone rang again. A number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. Mr. Thompson. This is Pastor Williams from Riverside Community Church. I just saw the news. We've been praying for you every single day. I want you to know your volunteer position is waiting whenever you're ready to come back. And our congregation is taking up a collection to help you get back on your feet. Family takes care of family, Marcus. And your family. Marcus's vision blurred with tears he'd been holding back since the verdict was overturned. Maybe rebuilding wouldn't be as lonely as he feared. 3 months after walking out of that courtroom, Marcus stood in front of a garage bay in East Atlanta with keys trembling in his hand. Morning sun painted the building gold, highlighting fresh paint that covered decades of wear. New security cameras watched from every corner. LED lights glowed through windows that used to be cracked and taped. The building looked reborn, but the bones were the same. His garage. His shop. The place he'd spent 37 years building from nothing. Emma and Ryan flanked him, both grinning like children on Christmas morning who'd been keeping a secret for months and could finally reveal it. How? Marcus whispered, staring at the building he'd lost. The landlord sold this place. I checked property records online from the hotel. Some investment company bought it 2 months ago. Ryan's grin widened. Mitchell and Mitchell Holdings. It's our investment company. We bought the building, evicted the vape shop, renovated everything from the foundation up. It's yours again, Pops. Free and clear. No rent. No landlord. No one who can take it away. We're transferring the deed to your name today. Marcus's knees nearly gave out. Emma caught his arm, steadying him. I can't accept this, Marcus said, his voice cracking. This is too much. You've already done so much. The hotel, the lawyers, fighting for me. I can't take more from you. You gave us everything when you had nothing, Emma interrupted, her eyes fierce. You fed us when you were starving. You gave us your bed when you had nowhere else to sleep. You risked everything, your freedom, your reputation, your life, to save 2 kids nobody else wanted. Let us give you something back. Please. We need to do this. Marcus unlocked the door with shaking hands. The smell hit him first, new paint and fresh wood instead of motor oil and decades of accumulated grease. But underneath, he could still smell the history. His history. The garage bay looked like something from a magazine. Pristine concrete floors with epoxy coating that gleamed under professional lighting. New lifts, 2 of them, top-of-the-line hydraulic systems. Tool chests in cherry red, organized with labels he recognized as Ryan's neat handwriting. The walls had been painted a clean white with gray accents. Professional signage read, Thompson's Automotive, in letters 2 feet tall. But scattered throughout were pieces of his old life. His ancient workbench stood in the corner, refinished but unmistakably his, the same burn marks from a welding accident in 2003, the same dent from dropping a transmission in 2011. His tools hung on the wall, organized exactly how he'd always kept them. The lift he'd bought used 20 years ago stood beside the new ones, refurbished and humming smoothly. Even his ancient radio sat on a shelf, preset to the jazz station he'd listened to every single morning for 3 decades. We saved everything from the evidence locker and storage, Ryan explained, watching Marcus touch familiar objects like he was making sure they were real. Every tool, every part, every bolt, every piece of equipment. We cataloged it all, restored what could be restored, and brought it back. Your business is ready to reopen tomorrow if you want. We've already filed all the paperwork, updated your licenses, and spread the word to your old customers. Marcus walked through the space in a daze. A wrench set his father had given him when he was 16, now cleaned and hanging in a place of honor. A calendar from 1998 still on the wall, the year he'd found Emma and Ryan, preserved in a shadow box frame. The coffee maker that only worked if you hit it twice before brewing, now sitting on a new counter with a note taped to it, still only works if you hit it twice. Some things shouldn't change. He laughed through tears at that note. Emma's handwriting. There's something else, Emma said softly. She led him to a staircase he didn't remember. It climbed to a second floor that hadn't existed before. She opened a door at the top. The apartment took his breath away. Open floor plan with a real kitchen, not just a hot plate and a mini fridge. A bedroom with a king-sized bed and windows overlooking the street. A bathroom with a walk-in shower instead of a rusted tub. A living room with comfortable furniture and a television. Windows overlooked the garage bay below, but soundproofing kept the space quiet. We built you a new apartment above the shop, Emma continued. Better than the old one. Soundproofing so garage noise won't keep you awake. Climate control so you're not freezing in winter or roasting in summer. Real appliances. Washer and dryer. Everything you need. You'll never have to worry about rent or eviction again. This is yours, Pops. Forever. Marcus sank onto the couch, overwhelmed. I don't understand. How did you afford all this? The building alone must have cost. We're successful attorneys, Pops, Ryan said, sitting beside him. We work for one of Chicago's top firms. We've been saving for years, investing wisely, preparing for this exact scenario. And honestly, this didn't even dent our savings. You gave us everything. This is the least we can do. Subscribe, you need to see what happens next. There's one more thing, Emma said, pulling an envelope from her purse. The civil lawsuit against the city settled yesterday. The city is paying you $3.2 million in compensation for wrongful imprisonment. Detective Harrigan's assets are being seized to contribute another $500,000. Between the settlement and the property, you're set for life, Pops. You never have to work another day if you don't want to. Marcus stared at the settlement papers, numbers so large they didn't seem real. $3 million. You were supposed to die in prison for a crime you didn't commit, Ryan said, his voice hard. They stole 5 months of your life and tried to take the rest. $3 million isn't enough, but it's a start. Use it however you want. Travel. Retire. Buy a fishing boat. Whatever brings you peace. But we know you'll keep working anyway, Emma added with a knowing smile, because fixing things is what you do. You fix cars. You fix broken systems. You fix people. You fixed us when the whole world had thrown us away like garbage. Marcus pulled them both into a hug, these two people who'd been strangers behind a dumpster 27 years ago and were now his greatest achievement. Not because of their law degrees or their million-dollar cases, but because they'd learned to love like he'd taught them, fiercely, unconditionally, and without keeping score. A knock on the apartment door interrupted the moment. Ryan opened it to reveal Pastor Williams with a crowd from Riverside Community Church flowing in behind him, 30 people carrying covered dishes, cards, balloons, and welcome home signs painted by children. They filled the apartment with noise and laughter and food and the kind of love that builds communities from broken pieces. Marcus's church family who'd never stopped believing in him, who'd prayed for him daily, who'd collected money to help him rebuild. People who knew him not as a wrongful conviction statistic, but as the man who'd volunteered every Tuesday for 6 years serving dinner to people who had nothing. Marcus looked around at faces old and new. His church family. His children. His second chance at life. The garage that had witnessed his arrest now overflowed with celebration. "Thank you," he said to Emma and Ryan, his voice breaking. "For not forgetting. For coming back. For fighting when I'd given up hope. For being the kind of people who make the world better." Emma kissed his cheek. "You taught us that family isn't blood. It's choice. We chose you 27 years ago when we asked you not to leave us behind that dumpster. We're still choosing you, Pops. Every single day for the rest of our lives." Hit subscribe if this story moved you. Through the apartment window, Marcus saw a car pull up to the garage, an old Honda with transmission problems, a customer who'd seen his reopening announcement. His first job in his reclaimed life. Marcus grabbed his father's wrench set and headed downstairs, Emma and Ryan following. They watched with pride as their father slid under the Honda and got to work doing what he did best. Building things. Fixing things. Saving things worth saving. 27 years ago, 2 children behind a dumpster had saved Marcus from a life of isolation. Today, those children had saved him again from a system designed to destroy him. The circle was complete. The family he'd chosen had chosen him back. And justice, delayed but not denied, had finally come home.